So, I've started working on a project in my survival world that I've been meaning to work on for a long time. The basic idea is simple enough. I have a stronghold fairly close to spawn, and for years I've wanted to dig out the end portal and create an inverted pyramid so that I could have easy access and fly right into my end portal. But that's not what this video is about. What this video is about is all the time I spent on all the things I just had to do first before I could even get started. In other words, yak shaving, which refers to when you end up pursuing a endless series of tasks that have to be completed before you can get to the original goal. So, first things first. Before I get started on a project like this, I like to spend some time in creative mode planning. I don't necessarily try to build out the entire project, although sometimes I do. What I try to do is make some decisions about the most important details and the things that are going to be hardest to change if I change my mind about them. I would hate to spend a ton of time in survival collecting specific resources and starting to build only to decide that I didn't like it at all and it was just a complete waste. So I spent some time in creative coming up with the general concept, and a few things became clear. Before I could get started, I was going to need crying obsidian, which cannot be crafted and is hard to get in any decent amounts. I was going to need honeycomb for candles, and I was going to need a large amount of dye for dyed concrete candles and color coded shulker boxes for all the blocks I was going to have to mine. So, step one, crying obsidian. The easiest way to get crying obsidian is from piglin bartering, but bartering is so slow. So, before I could get started, I was going to have to build a farm. Thankfully, I already have a gold farm, and copious amounts of gold from using this farm to mend my tools. This farm was an adventure in itself because before I could even get started, I felt like I had to decorate it because I can't just let such an important farm sit and be ugly. So I had to surround the entire area and floor and ceiling in glass. But before I could do that, I had to spend hours collecting all the sand and smelting the sand into glass. But back to the task at hand. Thankfully, building a bartering farm is pretty simple in Bedrock because there's a nice mechanic or glitch or whatever you want to call it where you can move a gold block back and forth and the piglins will complete their trades immediately. So, after luring and name tagging a piglin and getting them in a hole, now I have access to all the crying obsidian I could ever need. So on to step two, the honeycomb. I was going to need lots of honeycomb for candles, but also for waxing copper for reasons that will become obvious in a bit. Since I don't have an automated bee farm, I was going to have a good amount of downtime while harvesting manually. So before I could get started, I was going to have to decide how to spend all this downtime. I have copious amounts of nether quartz ore from mining out my nether, and I'm going to need a ton of quartz for a library I'm going to be building for all of my enchanted books. So this would be the perfect opportunity to mine some of the quartz with a fortune pickaxe. But before I could even get started with this, it gives a ton of experience. So I was going to have to decide how to spend all those levels, and what better way than to enchant even more books for my library. So before I could get started, I was also going to have to build a new enchanting table setup. And I've also been wanting to have a happy guest around my base area. So this was going to be the perfect opportunity to rehydrate a dried ghast. And why settle for double tasking when I can triple task instead? So, with decisions made, I harvested my honeycomb, mined my quartz, enchanted some books, and rehydrated a happy guest. And with all of that out of the way, now I can move on to the most daunting challenge of all. Step three, collecting a ton of dye. Now, sure, I could go around harvesting every last flower from my world, turning it into a depressing wasteland devoid of any color and joy. But thankfully, in Bedrock Edition, you can bone meal small flowers directly, and more of the same flower will grow on neighboring blocks. So, really, the task at hand was collecting as much bone meal as possible. Now, I had a wonderful bone meal farm early on in this world, which uses bone meal on nylium to generate fungus and roots that gets turned into even more bone meal and fed back into the system. But this whole thing got nerfed when it started using up more bone meal than it produced. So I made a second farm that does the exact same thing, but with moss. And that still works, but it is slow, so slow. So before I could get started on collecting all my dyes, I decided I would need a new improved bone meal farm V3. Now, building this bone meal farm was going to take a lot of time, so this was going to be the perfect chance for something else I've been meaning to do, build a sniffer farm. Now, sniffers are painfully slow at digging up torch flower and pitcher plant seeds, and the eggs take quite a bit of time to hatch. So building this bone meal farm at the same time as breeding the sniffers was going to be absolutely imperative. So before I could even get started on the bone meal farm, now I had to build a sniffer farm. But first, more design and creative, because who wants an ugly sniffer farm when you can have a cute sniffer farm that looks like a sniffer and actually sniffs? So I had to design a minecart collection system where the minecart going over to detector rails spaced at just the right distance would send a redstone signal to a sniffing mechanism. And it's actually quite a bit of a puzzle if you've never done it before to figure out how to make a 2D array of sticky pistons all move in unison. I decided to build the body of the sniffer out of nether wart, warped wart, and shroom lights because they fit together thematically and they look kind of shaggy like the sniffer itself. So, with the design out of the way before I could get started on the farm, I had to farm all the huge fungus to even get enough of those shroom lights. And boy, did I ever underestimate how long that would take. Now, you're probably thinking with all that done, I could just move straight on to building the sniffer farm. And you might have been right, except with all those farms to build, it was becoming so clear to me that trading away all my emeralds to clerics for redstone or going out mining for it just isn't going to be sustainable for me long term. So it was finally time to build the witch farm I've been meaning to build for years. Luckily, I have a witch hut fairly close to spawn, and these farms are pretty easy to build. But first, there were a pair of black cats by the witch hut. If I ever wanted to have my own black cats, taming these two would save me a ton of time, because the only other way to get black cats is to have village cats spawn during a full moon. And who wants to really go through that much trouble? So I tamed these two and brought them back to my base. And then I could finally build the witch farm and the storage system. So with the cats rescued, the witch farm built, an endless supply of redstone hand, and sniffer farm built with two sniffers sniffing up the torch flower seeds I could use to breed even more of them. Now I could finally move on to building the bone meal farm V3. So the current meta for bone meal farms in Bedrock is to build a fish farm. It's very simple in principle. You just build a large platform with a shallow layer of water and proper lighting, and fish will spawn in and immediately pathfind to deeper water. Because fish in Bedrock Edition are big boned and drop bones when you kill them instead of bone meal, if you do it in the right biome and you build these tipped arrow killers and hold a looting 3 sword, it makes for a really great farm. Before I could get started on the actual farm, first I had to flatten the ocean floor and smelt sand into glass for the ceiling. And of course, because I simply cannot have ugly unstained glass for my beautiful farm, and I love how cyan glass looks underwater, I had to smelt some cactus for green dye, cornflowers for blue dye, and combine it into cyan. Oh, and because the farm relies on fish pathfinding to deeper water, if you have any deeper water nearby that's not in your farm, fish will try to pathfind there instead. And of course, there was a giant aquifer under the surface right next to where I was building, so I had to fill all that in too. But with all that out of the way, the farm itself was fairly easy to build, but it did need to be lit up. With how long it took me to farm all those shroom lights for the sniffer farm, I certainly wasn't going to do that again. Glowstone and sea lanterns don't work because those are transparent blocks. I could have used frog lights, but I don't have a frog light farm, so I landed on using copper bulbs instead, which is where some more of that honeycomb from earlier comes in, as now I would need to wax each copper bulb to keep the light level. But just like that, the bone meal farm V3 was working. Almost a little too well, collecting large amounts of bones and an even larger amount of cod, salmon, and tropical fish. So obviously, I was going to need a new improved storage system, and obviously, it would be a dire mistake to settle for storing bones when I could be compacting them down into bone meal blocks automatically. So it was time for creative mode yet again, so I could finally learn how to use crafters and how to get them to automatically craft, and how I could chain them together to get bones to automatically craft into bone meal, and the bone meal to automatically craft into bone blocks. And because of the race of the farm, I was also going to need to figure out how to divert the items into two separate streams for processing at double speed, filter out all the bones for compacting, send the fish a different direction, and then recombine the output into a single set of chests at the end. And then with the storage system design, I still had to mine out even more blocks to make room and build the storage system in survival. And of course, because I don't want to forget that my new improved bone meal farm V3 is there, I had to build a tropical fish to decorate the entrance to the farm. But with the fish farm working smoothly, only one final problem remained before I could get back to whatever it was that I was working on in the first place. I think it was something with an end portal. Anyway, that one last problem was what to do with all the cod and salmon and tropical fish. Sure, I could smelt the cod and salmon to get more food than I could ever eat, or just burn it all in lava and be done with it. But this was clearly the right time to finally populate my fishing island with fishermen villagers so that I could trade the fish for emeralds. But why go through all that work just to get ripped off in trades? So, first, zombie curing to get the best prices. Luckily, I have my zombie curing house. Unfortunately, since the last time I used it, one of the updates broke my rail system, and now the villagers weren't going where they're supposed to. So before I could zombify and cure any of my villagers, I had to fix this. And since I definitely didn't want to risk accidentally letting my zombie out and having him burn up in sunlight and having to capture and name tag a new one, this meant yet another trip to creative mode to figure out a fix before I could build it. With that fixed, I traded with each villager to lock in their profession, turn them into a zombie, turn them back into a villager, put them on a boat, brought them to my fishing island. And once there, they were still trying to pathfind to the mainland and kept knocking each other straight into the water. So I took them farther away, made sure they linked up to new beds and workstations, broke those beds and workstations, and returned them to my fishing island. But they were still trying to pathfind to the mainland. I have so many villagers scattered around everywhere that who even knows where the village boundaries are at this point? So who knows? Villagers are kind of a mystery like that. So obviously, I just had to build a better fence around the island. So I planted oak trees, chopped them down, turned them into fences, placed all the fences, and now our villagers are safe and sound. Now, with all my yaks shaved, piglins bartered with, honeycomb sheared, quartz mined, books enchanted, cats rescued, endless supply of redstone secured, sniffers sniffing up flowers, fish traded for emeralds, fish bones turned into bone meal, and bone meal used to bone meal flowers for dye, I can finally get around to mining out my end portal so I can build my new entrance. I've even made a tiny bit of progress. So, yak shaving gets talked about often in a bit of a negative light. People will tell you not to shave yaks because then you spend all of your time shaving yaks instead of doing the thing you wanted to do in the first place. There is this kind of humorous nature to yak shaving in that the supposed necessity of all these tasks is somewhat dubious. It's usually a matter of perspective. what to one person looks like a necessary task that must be done before starting, to another person looks like it's just a side quest or a distraction. So, with all that said, is yak shaving actually a problem? Honestly, it can be kind of fun, but so can just going ahead and building the thing you wanted to build in the first place. Obviously, Minecraft is just a game, so you should go ahead and do whatever you want to do. If you want to just collect some blocks manually and build things, and that's what you enjoy, don't feel like you have to build all these farms. But if you enjoy this process and getting distracted and finding ways to get larger amounts of blocks for larger builds, feel free to do that too. It's just a game. Now, in the real world, there can be this very fine line between going ahead and doing that thing that is going to make you more productive over the long run versus wasting tons of time on trivial things that really don't matter and just distract you from getting things done. It takes judgment and practice and experience to learn the difference. So try to just be conscious of what you're doing. And remember that it's perfectly all right to get it wrong. Shockingly enough, I was actually holding myself back here from even more yak shaving. It would have been so easy for me to build out that automated honey farm, or to capture another 10 piglins to make the bartering even faster, or to actually decorate that witch farm, or to build automatic wood and huge fungus farms, or build that froglight farm, or any number of other necessities I could have found for myself, because that's how yak shaving goes. But since I do engage in plenty of yak shaving in my world and do so proudly, I thought it would be fun to create a monument to yak shaving in my world. And what better way than to designate my farming district as my yak shaving district, and to create some new pixel art to show up on the map of my world. So one final bit of yak shaving before I can call this complete. So before I could build the pixel art, first I had to design it. So one trip to ChatGPT later, I had a rough sketch. But because ChatGPT really only understands the style of pixel art and does not quite seem to understand that the pixels in various parts of the image actually need to be lined up to a grid, I had to do some manual adjustment. But with that done, I built the art in my world, and now I have some brand new pixel art to commemorate my yak shaving district. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you have the same tendency for yak shaving that I do and so many of us have, or if you have any thoughts on whether yak shaving is worthwhile, please leave a comment below. I will try to include some various links in the description of the video, but thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.